Good morning, everyone. We're so excited to see all of you this morning, and we're very excited about this presentation. I'm Cheryl Johnson Watts, Project Director for the Pennsylvania Charter Schools Program Grant, and we are doing a series of grant virtual summits to enable our grant recipient schools to share their best practices with each other, as well as the charter community and the general public at large. These presentations can be found at our YouTube playlist, and this presentation that is about to be presented will arrive in the playlist on this coming Tuesday. So we're very excited about that. We are thrilled to present Seven Generations Charter School located in Emmaus, Pennsylvania. They're doing tremendous work related to environmental literacy and preparing children to make a powerful impact on our future. And so without further ado, I'm going to bring this presentation to Mandy Suro, who will introduce herself as well as the team.
All right. Thank you, Cheryl. Everybody can hear me? Okay. We're just having some technical difficulties, but I think we worked them out. So thank you for your patience. So we are Seven Generations Charter School, and we're so excited to talk about just embracing the STEELS standards. We've been working with our staff for the past year now of introducing these new standards. And even though it's kind of our jam and our mission and vision, we've really seen our staff, once they embrace these standards, get really motivated on and excited about introducing these science concepts in unique and exciting ways. So we're excited to tell you how we do it, different things that we've been doing for years, and some things that we're going to be changing as we embrace these STEELS standards. Next slide. So just a little bit about who we are and our team. Amanda Cosman is not here today, but she is our amazing principal and CEO. Myself, I am the Community Relations and Development Director. And presenting today, we have Jennifer Hirsch, who is our Director of Curriculum K4, and Johanna Roche, who is our Director of Curriculum K8. A little bit about 7Gen and who we are. We are a K-8 charter located right here in Emmaus in the Lehigh Valley and serving 19 different districts from 2009. We have a unique kind of location here as we're right in a little suburban community, but we pull a lot from our Allentown, Bethlehem, Easton population of urban students. We pull from our rural areas as well, so we're just kind of this unique melting pot of lots of different cultures and backgrounds, which we absolutely love. We do have a high economically disadvantaged population, and it's all about bringing those kids into this area, getting them involved in their community, teaching them how they can be active members of a community, whether it's in our natural and environmental systems and our social systems of our town and our community. So you'll hear lots about that, but all that together is our environment as the integrating context, which we call EIC for short. So here we go. We're going to pass it on to Joe and Jen.
So today we are going to be going through the following things. So we really want to start with giving you an overview of the STEELS, and then we're going to talk specifically about the environmental literacy and sustainability standards and what are our ways to do that. We're going to talk about foundation boxes. We're going to give you some examples of STEELS in action, both at the elementary and at the secondary level, and then have some time for discussion about bringing it back to your school. So at this point, everyone has seen PA STEELS quite a bit. We see them all around on our schools, everything we get sent from PDE. So just really quickly, if you're not super familiar with what the PA STEELS standards look like, this graphic gives you a really good idea. So when we're talking about the PA STEELS, the reason why Pennsylvania wanted to change to the STEELS was to ensure that our students were really learning how to think like a scientist. And our old standards didn't have this piece that you see in the middle called the performance expectation. So what Pennsylvania did here is they adjusted the standards so that way students have a performance expectation, meaning that they are showing their teachers that they understand a concept versus telling their teachers that they understand the concept. So the performance expectation is what you're going to see as like the main goal within these foundation boxes. And then there are a bunch of little pieces that add on to that. So when your teachers are looking at the PA STEELS, you really want to make sure that they're looking at the foundation boxes as a whole, because the standard listed on its own does not seem very in depth. But once you start to look at the foundation boxes, there are all these different pieces that go into that one standard that makes it very detailed and really, really allows the teacher to incorporate all of these different practices that will kind of spiral over the years, elementary all the way through to high school, and allow the students to continue to grow on the same skills while performing some sort of expectation that's related to a more specific topic. So again, the performance expectation is going to be the end goal, but to get there in the foundation boxes, you're going to see practices, core ideas, and the cross-cutting concepts. So all three of those are going to relate back to what I was talking about with the spiraling. So as the students go through the STEEL standards throughout their academic experience, they are going to have similar practices, core ideas, and cross-cutting concepts. And really, that's going to allow the students to continue to enhance these skills that a scientist would have over time as they develop. So it really helps them become critical thinkers. It allows them to become creative, and it really allows them to think outside of the box versus what the standards allowed them to do previously. So here at 7th Gen, we really enjoy the content connections and the Pennsylvania connections of the PA STEELS Foundation boxes because two different reasons. The content connection really allows us to be interdisciplinary, which is something that we focus on a lot with our EIC curriculum framework. So those content connections are going to allow us to relate science topics to history. A lot also allows us to connect them to math and to ELA. And that's something that our curriculum framework really pushes us to do and pushes our teachers to do when they create our science curriculum. So those content connections are so good. And we all know that the more interdisciplinary experience that a student has, they're going to be able to connect with different parts of the standard in different ways. Science is not going to be everyone's favorite, but you are going to have students who ELA is really their favorite. And if you are making these interdisciplinary connections, they're going to be able to access this information in a way that makes sense for them. And then beyond that, the Pennsylvania connections, we really utilize that because, like Mandy was saying, everything that we have our students learn, they learn within the context of their local environment, whether it's the social systems or the natural systems or both. So if you are having a hard time specifically with the environmental literacy and sustainability part of the standards, that's really where we suggest people start, because those PA connections will give you direct information about where your teachers can start to show students where these standards are happening within the context of their community. And again, like Mandy was saying, we have students that come to us from cities, we have students that come to us from really rural areas, everything in between. So those PA connections, you're going to find that your students, no matter where you are located in the state, they're going to be able to access that in one point or the other, or your school could work to bring them to those places, wherever those connections might be, so they really get to see what it looks like real world. So when we're talking about those environmental literacy and sustainability standards, those are really focusing on the practices, ecological processes, and systems that comprise the environment, which includes both the human systems and their influences. So when we're talking about environmental literacy, and the reason why Pennsylvania includes environmental literacy and sustainability is we really want our students to understand not only just the science topic, but what is the whole process involved in that, and how do human systems influence that, and vice versa. So I really invite you, if this is feeling very different for you in your school, to embrace that and see how you can make that work with whatever makes your charter special. So sustainability, of course, is the balanced use of natural and renewable resources. And then when we're talking about sustainable practices, we're really trying to make sure that we allow the ecological function and species diversity. We're keeping those intact as much as possible, also considering environmental justice, equality, and economic stability for our current and our future generations. A couple other things is for the environmental literacy and sustainability standards specifically, you probably have noticed that those are written as grade banded performance expectations that are built around the 3 dimensions. So those are science and engineering practices, disciplinary core ideas, and the cross-cutting concepts. So because those are grade level banded, they're specifically meant that way, so that way the curriculum can spiral even more within like shorter periods of time versus the whole K through 12 academic experience. And again, those dimensions are elaborated much more in the foundation boxes. I'm going to pass it to Jen.
All right. So what Joe and I would like to do now is take you through what it really looks like, right? How do these standards come to life in the classroom, in the community, and like what are kids actually doing? So what we have set up next is an elementary experience, and then you'll also get to see a middle school experience focused in on particular foundation boxes. So for the preceding videos that you're going to see, we're really going to be focusing in on this standard in this foundation box. So particularly, we're going to be looking at a first grade class and how we utilize our PA context. And specifically, we're going to be seeing kids at a wetland of a pond habitat. And then what are the different science and engineering practices that they're doing in the field and in the classroom? What are those disciplinary core ideas and the cross-cutting concepts? So in this experience, you're really going to see students who are, they're going to the pond, they're identifying the different physical characteristics of the pond, and then also identifying what is that value in our social community, but also in the natural world, and how can that be almost a litmus test to show the health of our community by looking at the pond and all of its characteristics. So within this experience, it's basically like a 3-month-long study. So our kids are visiting our local pond at least once a week. And in doing so, they're collecting lots of data, they're recording and sharing their observations, they're looking for trends and patterns. And obviously, over 3 months' time, seasons are going to change. Animals are going to hibernate, migrate, adapt. They're going to get to see all these things. So there's a lot of science and engineering practices right there and analyzing all that data over a 3-month time period. In the disciplinary core ideas, we're really looking at, what are the different kinds of living things in a wetland habitat? And then also in the land habitat next to it, and how do those compare and contrast, right? And then the cross-cutting concepts over this study that we'll also be looking at is, the patterns in the natural world. That will really be weather, it will be life cycles. So it's a multi-layered unit. So in essence, by picking this one place in our community, this local context, we're able to achieve many different standards and layered and in depth as time goes on. The way we approach it at 7Gen and the way we thought, how could we most help people learn how they could build their curriculums and layer their lessons is we always start with a hook. So our first step is always like we want to hook their curiosity. And in that, we use the phenomena, which is a big part of these new standards. Then after we hook their curiosity, we want them to experience it in the community. So this is where we take them out and we dig into a lot of these science and engineering practices and having them experience these cross-cutting concepts, not just talking about them. And then the third layer is really, how do we then connect that with our content, with what Joe said? How do we connect it within ELA, utilizing math, some social studies as well? So we bring all those fields together. So in this next video, we can probably go to the next slide. We're going to show you that first step, the hook. So again, lens of we're taking our first graders to the pond. We want to hook them, having all this curiosity to be able to drive and have lots of questions to answer this investigation.
The never-ending push into new frontiers sometimes puts animals on a collision course with new problems that must be solved. Wood frogs live across the US and Canada. but they've also moved further north than any other American reptile or amphibian. As far north as Alaska. Short summers and very cold winters create some unique problems for a frog, resulting in one of the most extreme solutions in the forest. Frogs are exothermic or cold-blooded. They're only ever as warm as the day's weather. In Alaska's warm summers, they are highly active, rushing to mate before the short summer ends. But when winter approaches, they must almost give up on living. At the onset of winter, wood frogs burrow beneath leaf litter to wait out the cold months. Where they freeze almost half solid. All brain activity ceases. The frog's heart no longer beats. By clinical standards, it is essentially dead. Until the temperature rises again and the frozen wood frog begins to thaw. Miraculously, this nearly dead frog reanimates. Its heart begins to beat again, it breathes. It's alive. It may not be the walking dead, but it is the hopping dead, returning to the forest floor for another weird cycle of living and dying.
So you can imagine some of the questions that come from our first graders after they see that, because it does seem contrary to really what is belief. Maybe you're a little mesmerized and learned something new that you never knew or thought of. But how could something that is alive have their brain cease, their heart stop, become frozen? How could that truly still be living? And clearly it is. So maybe if we watch these creatures in our own environment, because we have wood frogs here in Pennsylvania, it gets very cold here in Pennsylvania, maybe not at the same temperatures as Alaska, but it certainly does go below freezing. Do those same things happen with our wood frogs? And if so, like, how is that phenomena happening? So with that leads us to get out into the community to really find these frogs, figure out like what are the patterns of our behavior, so you can really, I hope, start seeing how some of these foundation skills and concepts and engineering practices and cross-cutting concepts all come together. So now we'd like to show you how our kids are experiencing it in our community, because it's one thing for Johanna and I just to talk about it, but we really want you to see how it actually lives out here with our teachers and our kids. So there you were able to see in a really short snippet how we try to bring everything together. Kids experiencing the community and that final concept also of connecting the content area. So our kids go once a week. You saw them taking the temperature. That's going to help them answer that phenomena. Is the water getting colder? Is it staying the same? The air temperature, what's happening with that? What animals are, here? We start this investigation in September and it goes through the beginning of December. So they're able to see all those weather patterns, some life cycle patterns of plants and animals. And then you saw that connection in the classroom too, where it further enhances, where the kids can say, how can we find out the answers to some of these questions? So we utilize some research, some science sites, lots of writing, collaboration, and what looked like normal classroom teaching, right? Venn diagrams, reading books, and things like that. And then the final piece too, that we talked about is that connecting with the content to be more specific to this phenomena. We're always looping back, trying to answer that question. So, again, I spoke to how our kids, are always collecting, analyzing, interpreting data. They're looking at biodiversity. They're looking at patterns of life cycle, weather, hibernation. They're reading lots of informational text to gain that understanding, and then lots of comparing and contrast. So thank you, Terrence, for, mentioning that authentic use of experience. And we can really say this is like off script a little bit from this, but in looking at our school data and our science PSSAs and things like that, we do notice that, like, for example, our students who have IEPs, right? If they have a reading disability, a math disability, we're not seeing, data successes in the PSSAs for them. However, when we see how they do in science, they are proficient and teetering up to the advanced. And the whole question is the why. And it's because of that, Terrence. It's because we've leveled the playing field. We have made something very accessible through this experiential, authentic experience that they can access despite having other abilities, right? That might not translate to a state test, but for this, they really shine. So we are fully committed and fully believe in the power of this model for everybody. And with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Joe so you can see, like, this really can happen in middle school, of course, because they have the skills, but don't underestimate the power of our little kids too, because if they can do it, imagine what our big kids can do.
Yes. So what you're looking at here is one of the 6 through 8 environmental literacy and sustainability grade band STEELS standards. So the performance standards here is that students who demonstrate understanding can develop a model to describe how agricultural and food systems function, including the sustainable use of natural resources and the production, processing, and management of food, fiber, and energy. So just like Jen went through, you can see what the science and engineering practices are there. You can see our disciplinary core ideas and then our cross-cutting concepts. And you can see by looking at both the elementary and the secondary STEELS, how those overlap with each other and spiral and allow the students to revisit those concepts over time. So just like at the elementary level, we follow the same idea of hook to get our students engaged with the phenomenon. So this standard is really talking a lot about agriculture. Our students have a really deep understanding by the time that I get to our middle school program of agriculture, because one of the other first grade units is about agriculture. So really what we're trying to do here is take it to the next level and either further that level of understanding. So this would be the phenomena that we would show for that standard.
Grown all over these mountains is one of the weirdest plants you'll ever see. It's a strange type of giant maize that grows up to 20 feet tall. These disconcerting finger-like things are its roots, suspended meters off the ground, and they ooze with a gooey mucus. And it's this mysterious mucus that could help feed the planet and end farming's toxic reliance on chemical fertilizers.
This is the Holy Grail.
As long as scientists can crack its code. This is the town of Totontepec in southern Mexico. For centuries, possibly even millennia, this maize has been meticulously cared for by the indigenous farmers there.
Nos contaron nuestros antepasados, nuestros abuelos, que pues el maíz lleva mucho más de 2000 años. Empecé a cultivar de los 13 años. Jugábamos con esa gelatina que daba pues la raíz desde muy pequeño, pues no sabíamos qué tenía o por qué se le salía. Para nosotros significa mucho, nuestra semilla es bueno, no tienen otros pueblos o otros países como de nosotros.
But word about this mysterious giant corn eventually reached the ears of curious scientists. One of those was Howard Yana Shapiro, who was living in Oaxaca all the way back in 1980.
I hear they have giant maize. So the word giant maize, kind of intrigued me. The maize that was growing was 16 to 18 feet tall. A normal maize that you see across America might be 8 to 10 feet tall, but this was gigantic. I just couldn't believe it. Seeing something that was mythical. And in many ways, it was mythical. On the surface of the roots, in a period when a maize plant would need nitrogen for that explosive growth, there was a mucilaginous material, really thick, very viscous. And we would watch it, and it would auto-dose itself, essentially.
And this mucus appeared to be allowing the plant to self-fertilize, meaning the farmers barely needed to add any artificial fertilizer.
The idea that a maize plant could make its own nitrogen sounded like science fiction to virtually everyone we talked to.
Okay, so that would be the video that we would show to our students. And with the knowledge that they already have about agriculture, they would know that a large majority of farmers have to manually add fertilizer to the soil in order for the plants to grow, especially if this is a farm that has been utilizing the same soil and the same land for many, many, many years. It becomes necessary for humans to add more fertilizer to keep the soil nutrient rich. So essentially the students would come up with many questions related to this. And then from there, what we do at the middle school level is we provide our students with an opportunity that we call Wednesdays in the Workplace. So this is really where our students are picking one community partner for the duration of the year, and they go to that community partner for that whole year. Every other Wednesday, they spend their Wednesday out in the field, and it's really allowing them to see all of the things that they're learning in school in a real world context, and more importantly, in a career-based context, so they can start to get an idea of what they want to do once they leave high school. So what you're going to see here is our 7th graders. They focus a lot on these type of agricultural based standards. They partner with a local farm called the Monocacy Farm Project. So this gives you an insight of some of the work that they get to do and how they might be making connections with their STEELS standards while they're out in the field. So you saw them both out in the field at Wednesdays in the Workplace, but you also saw how we bring it back to school. So we have hydroponic labs that we were able to purchase, and the students really get to explore this idea of how did that giant maze self-fertilize itself, and compare that to how hydroponics work, and being able to grow plants without any soil. So they're really starting to make these connections, that will push them into potentially becoming big parts of these fields in the future of urban farming, or maybe taking some of those ideas from the giant maze and seeing how can we come up with a more sustainable solution, instead of fertilizing the soil as much as we need to. So really what we're getting at here is, from just this one mucus phenomenon, you have all of these connections that the students are able to make, not just in their science classes, but they're taking these ideas into ELA, they're taking these ideas into math, they're taking these ideas into history, and we have our secondary teachers really work together, which can sometimes be unique. Sometimes at the secondary level, as you departmentalize, it's very easy to become siloed in the standards that you're teaching. But we really have our teachers work together to make sure that they understand the science topics, and that way our history, math, and ELA teachers are also incorporating those same topics and standards into their standards that they have to teach, and making sure that our students, even at the secondary level, are continuing to get an interdisciplinary education where there are connections being made from everywhere. So you're talking about a lot of guided notes that are drawn from informational text in ELA, labs, of course, in the science classroom for testing soil for nutrients. There is a lot of creating nitrogen cycle models. And then, of course, there's research on hydroponics and the process of adding those necessary nutrients into the soil. And again, like I was talking about previously with the history of farmland being used. Here in Pennsylvania, there's a lot of rich history that our history teacher can really tap into in regards to how long have these farms been here? What does that have to, what kind of outcomes have you had with needing to use fertilizers and so on and so forth?
So finally, we'd really like to leave you kind of with a blueprint. If you were inspired and thinking, wow, I'm really jazzed, that looks so cool. How can I get my kids out and learning, within, our community, whether that is, suburban, rural, urban, all of the above. So the blueprint would really be get out there just with your teaching team first, and really see and label and map out what are the different things in our local school community. What are the social systems, the businesses that are there, all the facets of it. What are the, natural components? Like, we're lucky, we're right at the bottom of a trailhead. We've got a South Mountain. We've in walking distance, have ponds and creeks and rivers. But what might be available, naturally to bus your kids to? Because our Wednesday in the workplace, our middle school kids, you saw that bus because they were bused that farm. It wasn't, right in our walking distance. So be creative and think about, make that list of what are all those learning opportunities. Then you could really take your standards and look at them through a different lens and say, I wonder if we could bring this standard to life by using this place that's accessible to us. And then you start building out from there. So really, the first thing you really have to do is really become and connect more with your local community. Take a slow walk, look at it more with a critical eye and an I wonder eye. You have that tree in front of your school. What could you use that for? You might never have thought of it that way before. So once you have all your areas of opportunity, and kind of think of it as, when you're mapping your community, dropping a pebble in a pond. You look at that first ripple. What's within your school building that you could really utilize? Then what's on your school campus? Then venture out into your school's neighborhood and maybe the larger community and even the region. That's what we do with our middle school kids. And then you layer those opportunities. And, when your kids are young, they're using their school building, their school campus, but as they grow, they get farther and farther away. And you keep building those experiences, like Joe said with the standard, it kind of becomes an onion that just keeps layering so beautifully. And that you could really bring the standards to life. So I think with this, I know we have some time left. I know we're here to answer, any questions that you may have or wonderings that we might be able to, point you in the right direction of resources or, things that we experimented with. So the time is now yours if you would like it.
I have a question to get the conversation started. How do you measure the the impact of the class on the students? What do you use as your measure of impact?
And that's a really good question, Cheryl. And I'll have Johanna speak to it at the upper end, but I can speak to elementary. And even as a former teacher who uses curriculum model, one of the things that we have to do for recharting, one of our statements and our objectives was that students will have a feeling of, service and commitment, and this intrinsic like commitment to like, I made a difference because of this community connection. So we had to create some kind of measurement, Cheryl, to say like, well, what are we getting from that? So at the end of these like long units of study, which at 7 Gen, they're a trimester long, the kids do this reflection survey of, this is what I knew at the beginning. This is what I knew now. What is the impact that I can make on my community or have made in my community? So it's pretty in depth. And as teachers, we would really go through those and look at, what part of it impacted them the most. Was it the service learning part? At the pond, it was very much like once the kids were learning about the fragility of that wetland system and how like the nearby community gardens, if there was pesticides and insecticides used there, how they could, get into the groundwater, which could eventually lead to the pond, which, could impact the frogs, and then the birds that eat the frogs and the whole system. So then their impact that year, they said, we felt so empowered because we went to borough council and we taught, like, these are first graders who did a presentation to our borough managers and our mayors and said, this place is so important to us and we think it's so important to our community, just for aesthetic value, but also for learning value and natural value of what our community could have in it. And they advocated for kind of like protecting the pond signs and educational signs that are now there. And you probably, saw them for a snippet in the video. Those came from first graders. So that's their impact. So is it quantifiable? Like, we can get data from, a STAR test or, a PSSA? No. So it's more of that. How can we dig down and at the end really have them reflect? And as little kids, sometimes it's an interview, right? Because they don't have the writing skills to express all the things that have impacted them or that they have learned. But that's one way that we do it, with those deep end of unit kind of discussions, conversations, reflections.
And then at the middle school level, we have our students complete, it's kind of like a journal that they take with them every Wednesday in the workplace when they go out into the field. And the students really reflect on the bus ride home of that experience, of what they got out of that day and how that connects to what they're doing in the classroom. And then we are in our 3rd year of having the middle school program, so we only rolled it out 3 years ago. So we're still working out a bit of the kinks here and there. So we've been talking a lot with our middle school students about their experiences, and we're actually continuing to make adjustments to our Wednesday in the workday partners to make sure that the partners are not just getting something from our students with the kind of like the volunteer-based work that they're doing, but they are also educating and offering our students a very similar type of experience, that they are really making a difference. They see the impact within the year that they're working with that partner. And the students are getting to not just see one part of it. They get to see many different aspects of wherever they're going out into the field, and kind of hooking on to something that they've became passionate about within the year of working there. So
yeah, and I'll just add one thing that I'm really excited about that just came our way this year is systems thinking has always been a part of what we do here. And from kindergarten through 8th grade, it's understanding the components of a system, how it works together. If one component isn't functioning, how it affects the system, whether it's in natural or social environments. And a professor from actually Lehigh University is working with their doctorate students to explore this concept in education, and how do we embed that into curriculum, and most importantly, how do we assess it, and how do we understand that students can take that critical thinking and that systems thinking, apply it different ways, utilize it different ways. So we're kind of really excited to kind of continue to grow in our journey, and to just explore that with some research-based practices to see if we can develop a universal assessment system to assess how students are utilizing that critical thinking and systems thinking in their learning. So more to come there, but we're kind of excited about that next phase as we move forward.
That is awesome.
Can you talk about the biggest struggle that you had in transitioning from the old standards to the STEELS standards and how you overcame them?
Yeah, so I think for us, our EIC units are fully teacher written. We do not purchase anything for those units. So over the years, each one of those units have been fully developed by the teachers that have touched those units and worked within those grade levels. So as you can probably imagine, we've been around for 15 years, right, Jen? 16?
Yep.
It was crazy. So a lot of those units have been worked 15 years, right? They're living documents. So as new teachers come into the grade level, they change things, they add new things. But for the most part, a lot of them were really well developed. So when Jen and I learned that the STEEL standards were coming, we knew that it could potentially be really tough on our teachers to say, hey, we have 2 years to completely rewrite these units. So what Jen and I did is we really wanted to take on the brunt of that work for our teachers. So we started going to trainings the minute that PDE announced that the STEEL standards were coming out. So even before the standards were fully available to the public, Jen and I were signing ourselves up for trainings on what are these going to look like. And then we would take that information back and work together to say what's going to be the best way that we can roll this out. So long story short, what we ended up doing is we used a lot of our summers for the last couple of years to look at creating crosswalks from the standards that were in the units that the teachers had created to what the new STEEL standards are. And I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It took hours of time. At the end of that process, what we ended up presenting to our teachers were those crosswalks of, here are the old standards, here are the new standards, and essentially, here are the standards you can remove from your units. Here are the standards that you just have to basically erase the old standard's name and paste the new standard in because it's essentially getting at the same thing, and the lessons that you have can still stay. Or here are the new standards that you need to add to this unit and that you need to come up with new lessons for. So that was the end of what we presented to our teachers. And then from there, this school year, we had laid out all of our professional development days to be very specific for our teachers to work with their grade level teams on making those necessary changes to their units. So what we did is, for our first PD of the year, which was in October when we did this, we had our teachers work on their Unit 2 STEELS changes. So what that meant was by the time Unit 2 started in the school year, they had already rewritten those units so they could actually roll them out. This past PD day that we had when we came back from break, we had the teachers work on Unit 3. So that way, by the time that Unit 3 comes in the school year, they're rolling out Unit 3. And then our last PD day of the year is them working on Unit 1 to roll out those specific ones because the state is requiring us to have these implemented and ready to roll out by June of this year. So that was our way that we did it. But I will say it was a lot of work. We took on a lot of the work to make sure that the teachers did not feel overwhelmed by the changes that they would have to make.
And I think another layer of that too, Cynthia, is, Joe and I did a lot of the background legwork, like things just to be in compliance and they're aligned, but there's a lot of teaching approach shifts in the STEELS too. So it's not enough for Johanna and I to be experts in it, right? We're not in the classrooms anymore. It's our teachers who are doing the front lines. So it was really important for us to find an organization that we found in the Da Vinci Center who presented and trained our teachers. We did this at the end of the year last year. We took a full PD and it was an immersion PD experience where the facilitators of the PD were very much like, I'm a Steel Standards teacher, and our teachers were the students to experience what it felt like to go through a completely phenomena that they had no sense of like grappling toward, like no knowledge basically, but for them to fully experience what it feels like to a student, what it looks like as a teacher, because it really is the flipped approach. It's not just, I'm going to stand up here and I'm going to lecture and the kids are going to get it. Inquiry is really about the kids driving it. And with that comes that level of teacher uncomfortability, right? Because there's all those unknowns with classroom management and where's it going to go? And suppose they ask something that I have no idea about. So it was getting them comfortable with the approach and getting excited about like where this could take us. So I think not only is it the alignment in the curriculum and what are we going to teach, but it's also getting comfortable with how does this look and sound different? And how do I do that as a teacher and be okay with letting go of some of the autonomy and putting the kids in that driver's seat?
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I just have one other question, if there is no other question. In terms of what the children that have taken these classes share with students who have yet to take these classes, have you had any information or details on that? Have any of the children shared with you, oh, I can't wait to take this because so and so mentioned that you went to the pond, or anything along those lines?
Something neat that we have, and you can add on it
Yeah.
too. It's something we've done since our inception that was really important to us. I think most of you out there can probably have some kind of memory of like the art show at your school, right? Where it was like that one time a year, everyone's art is highlighted and the whole community comes and you get to walk around. So we do that with our curriculum framework. We call it a gallery walk. And at the end of each trimester, each grade highlights all their learning from that. So the students have all these artifacts. The kids set up tables with experiments that they've done. And it's a time for our community to go through and for parents to experience what their kid has done. But more importantly, many times our kindergartners will be like, oh, what are we going to learn in first grade? Or, fourth graders are chomping at the bit to go upstairs and see what middle school is going. So it's their time to really for the kids to shine and be the leaders of that and facilitate that. And our kids get excited to see like what's to come. So that has been one thing that has just been a tradition that we do 3 times a year for the past 16 years. And I think that's the primary way I can think of that builds excitement.
Mhm.
I think the other big component is we do an all school morning meeting on every Wednesday. We take turns presenting. So it's just a really nice weekly touch point of what's first grade doing and what's fourth grade doing, and fifth grade, it's time to talk about what service project you're going to do to give back to the community, after your 3-month study, and getting everybody bought into all of those initiatives that people are doing throughout the building and getting them excited about, what's going on in current events and in our environment and our community. So that's just another like weekly touch point that's really important to our culture. We invite parents and community partners and grandparents, whoever wants to come in the door every Wednesday at 9 o'clock in the morning, which is a really, really nice tradition for 7 Gen.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to talk about all this morning.
Yeah. And I think it's hard when you go to a presentation like this and you're presenting with all this information, you might get really excited. But I know I'm very I gotta sleep on it. I like to absorb it. I like to sleep on it. And then my questions start to come. So I think we'd really like to leave you with, feel free to reach out to us as a resource if you have questions. I know, we're all very welcome and very passionate about our curriculum model and the work that we do. And we know it only benefits kids, and we want that to benefit kids beyond 7 Gen. So, hopefully our contact information is in there. You can reach out to us at any time. We always welcome visitors. So if you'd like to come visit 7 Gen and, spend some time in the classrooms or some time with us, we welcome that too. We just want as many kids to have these similar experiences and feel really inspired beyond just the kids at 7 Gen.
That's awesome. And on that note, I think we will conclude this presentation if there are not any other questions at this time. What is so amazing about the work that is being done is that the children are experiencing being a part of this of the world that they live in, and they're making a difference in it. It's not just what's happening to them, it's what they're doing and contributing in the midst of this process. So really hats off to all of you, and thank you so much for your continued dedication to furthering the lives of so many children across the area. And this information will be going out on our YouTube playlist, so it'll reach even more. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank
everyone.
you.